having a Rebbe is not being able to hero worship someone, a very great person. Of course it's that. That's a mitzvah in the Torah, to recognize a Gadol, the great person. It's accessing the deepest and most powerful part of yourself, of your ownership.
Welcome to Ordinary People with Extraordinary Stories. I'm Chana Weisberg, host of this podcast. Joining me today is a very special guest, Rabbi Shmuel Lew. Thank you so much for joining us. Rabbi Lew has been emissary of Chabad in England for the last many, many years. He has a personal connection. He had a very strong personal connection with the Rebbe and the Rebbitzin, and he's been an educator for many, many, many years. Rabbi Lew, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Can you start off with telling us a little about how you came to Chabad? What was your background, and how did you come to learn about the Rebbe and about Hasidus?
Well, I'm a Brooklyn boy from Williamsburg, which was then not really that Hasidic. It was very Jewish. And I went to a Jewish school, to Torah Vadas, through elementary school and high school. And I was quite active and quite popular and successful, happy where I was. And my brothers and I went to Camp Aguda. My mother, Allah Shalom, sent us to Camp Aguda in 1955. I was 15. And there I met a friend, a colleague, a similar age, Rabbi Ichmael Garari, and he invited me to a Tanya Shia by a guest who was there, Rabbi Beryl Shemtiv, who was an older bacher. And we spent that summer, a couple of weeks, studying the third part of Tanya. He gave us a tshuva all about the soul, about repentance. And after that, he followed up, sent me a Tanya when I was back in the city, and invited me to come to a Farbrengen of the Rebbe. Until then, I knew about Lubavitch vaguely as another Hasidic group, many Hasidic groups, but I knew that they were very special. And my late father, he was a lawyer, he was from Lithuanian stock, but he said that the Lubavitches go out of their own territory and reach out to others. And that's what I remember hearing from my father. And here, I went to the Farbrengen of Chalamoid Tzukis.
So you were in your teens still at this time? You were a teenager. You were a teenager still.
I was a teenager. I was in the 11th grade, just beginning. Mm-hmm. And I was, my personality type is I'm an active kind of a person. And I was there in the GO and in the youth minion, all these different things. And I went to that Farbrengen, and then they arranged a Shia of Tanya every Wednesday night in a dormitory in Torah Vadas. Mm-hmm. It was not in the actual yeshiva. It was not clandestine. It was known. But they didn't offer us official space. And there were several people there, several Lubavitch Bachurim. I learned for 2 years with Rabbi Geshem Mendel Gorelik, a very formidable, he was a Bacher, he was a yeshiva student in 770, and we were fascinated by him. I would go to...
What fascinated you? What fascinated? Like, what was it that made you feel this is something that I'm connected with, or this is something that speaks to me?
There were three things here. Number one was what he's teaching. Mm-hmm. Number two was his personality. Mm-hmm. But most of all, it was the leadership of the Rebbe, and seeing that here's a person that really, really, has his finger on the entire global pulse of the Jewish world, and at the same time is not afraid to do something about it. And in the 1950s, just right after the Holocaust, It was still in PSTD right now, PTSD. And imagine what it was like 70 years ago. And here was the Rebbe and teaching that you can reach out. It's not a defensive battle anymore. It's it's an idea that you have to go out to people. They really want to hear it. They're looking for something. That idea, I wasn't into outreach. I was a yeshiva boy doing what I had to do, studying my Hebrew studies in the morning, secular in the afternoon, sports. I played softball and did all kinds of activities. And I went to 7 Farbrengens that first year. But Rabbi Gorelik, he was he would tell stories. He would it's adjusting the message to your audience. He brought in, I remember once he brought in a tape, these big, large, well-on-stock tape recorders to play for us the niggin Hanedus Halolu, being sung by Bachrim. He did like that type of, he told a lot of stories, and he discussed not only the Tanya itself, which was talking about life and meaning and yourself, really helping you to find yourself. But at the same time, he also spoke about the application and about how it exists in families and communities. And a friend of mine, he's Rabbi Yossi Rattenberg, he's a Dayan in Baltimore, in Shavar Force Lema. We were extremely close friends. And the group was anywhere between, let's say, 5 and 10 people in any given Wednesday evening. But we would walk with Rabbi Geshem Mendel from the South 3rd Street building to Roebling Street, where he took the bus. And this was about 11 o'clock at night. And you sometimes would wait 15, 20 minutes for a bus. We waited with him. Then we decided that we're going to give him the 15 cents for the fare every week. And he would be in the middle of a story or something. Many, many weeks, we were there at the bus stop, and several buses went by. We did till 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, even later in the morning, just listening to him. And the next year, I walked quite often on Shabbos, and on the Shabbos, I would walk to Crown Heights anytime there might be a Farbrengen of the Rebbe, expected. And I was known, even at Torah that there was some quite elderly, formidable, renowned rabbis, my teacher, for example, but they all accepted me as a Lubavitcher. It was known that,
So what did that mean that you were a Lubavitcher for them? Like how were you different?
That's an excellent question. And because as far as I'm concerned, as far as they were concerned, it was the fact that I was going to Farbrengens and I was open about it and it was known. I didn't make a secret of it. It's not in my DNA. Everything about the Rebbe is about empowering you. And that's I guess I didn't analyze it then, but that's what was happening. What can you do? You became a leader. You became a worker. Invite other people to come to the Tanya Shia. Go there. It was something doing. And I look back, and later on, my friends, many of them, classmates, became heads of yeshivas and prominent rabbanim in different communities. And at some stage, a few years later, at Simcha or somewhere, I met some old friends. Said, "What were you missing?"
Right.
And what were you missing? So I said, I came to Lubavitch, and I did not have to give up anything that I had before, but everything that I had before became deeper, more flavored, more meaningful, more dynamic, more useful. Everything that I had became something completely on a different dimension.
And how did it do that? Like how do you feel that? Can you give an example of how it made it deeper or how it made it more applicable besides for this fearlessness of just going out there and sharing with everybody, which you spoke about, how did it I guess seep into every aspect of your life?
When these people asked me the question, it was already a couple of years later when I was already in the Lubavitcher yeshiva.
Mm-hmm.
They were just saying, what were you missing in your previous life? But really, it when you study Hasidus, you are we live in a generation and people where everyone pretty obedient. We have all young. I'm dealing with young people, thank God, all my life, and they venture some and they try all different types of things, and the grass always looks greener, but there's a basic grounding that people have. Now, that's a fantastic, powerful starting point. But Hasidus tells you that it's a starting point, and don't fall back on that. That's not what it's about. It's about growing. It's about understanding, not just putting on the tefillin, but appreciating that it's something much deeper, learning about it, learning about your life, what you're achieving. To me, the most important thing about the Rebbe's teaching in terms of in the community level and the global revolution that he did is that instead of Yiddishkeit being a personal journey, it becomes something to going to heaven or to wherever you want to say, a success on this world and the next world. It became something which God created the whole world in order that his glory should be in the world. And therefore, it's not about you. Mm-hmm. It's about God. And it's about getting other people what Hashem really wants from everyone. Now, that is reflected in everything that one does. The idea that it's more significant than just me.
Mm-hmm. So it's not just about you, it's about what God wants of us. And that,
right. Yes.
And that you felt permeated every aspect of your life.
It certainly permeated my consciousness.
Right.
And that to apply it, that's a struggle your whole life. But at least I knew that this is where it's at, because everything fits in here. Mm-hmm. It's inclusive, because that is why God created the world. That is why doing a mitzvah is more important than the spiritual feeling of it. And that's, to my knowledge, it's the only religion which says that the action is more important than the feeling, than the spiritual experience. And the reason is because God created the world in order that his presence should be expressed in the physical world. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, you will get a reward. You are on a personal journey, and the spiritual meaning of every commandment and of every act is significant, and you should know it, and you should live it, and you should experience it. But at the end of the day, it's something bigger than that.
Right. So, I mean, you were already religious. You were already in yeshiva. You were already practicing Torah. You were already keeping the mitzvot. You already knew about God. So in what way did it actually practically change your understanding or your perception or your actions? You're becoming so close to the Rebbe and Hasidus.
It meant taking your own religiosity as an individual, various customs and halachic things which perhaps was not doing, but also an awareness. I studied Hasidus, I studied Hasidic teachings, and went to Hasidic gatherings. It meant caring about it. Chabad was known for, and it is today, for its outreach and caring about others. But underpinning it is the teachings of the Rebbe, based on the teachings of all the generations that preceded. And that was an important part of everything that I did. It became something became meaningful. And then everything going to a Farbrengen of the Rebbe was an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't just knowledge. Wasn't then, but years later, I remember like perhaps when I was already married in the early 60s. And we lived in Crown Heights for 2 years before we came as emissaries to England. And a Shabbos in the summer, and you stand at a Farbrengen of the Rebbe for 2-3 hours, 4 hours, and then walk home. And people in the street, I couldn't fathom how people could be right here in this neighborhood. There were thousands of Orthodox Jews across the spectrum in Crown Heights, and they don't appreciate what a treasure there is. It was an experience. It wasn't just knowledge
Mm-hmm.
she got from a book. You can see it today, even on the videotape. It's not the same, obviously, but so I discovered the Rebbe. That's really what it was. It was the Rebbe, his vision, his teachings, his inspiration, his example. The miracles helped, but it was basically feeling that here was Judaism in focus, honest, not afraid of facing up to a reality. See, it was after the Holocaust. There were two basic types of movement. One was away from everything. Many moved to Australia literally, but others spiritually wanted to get as far away from it all as they could.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they had positive motivations, just for survival. And others became enclave Jews. They survived, and they made communities with a very big wall around them, so that nobody should stop. I'm not going to be blamed for the vanishing American Jew, as they used to call it, for the whatever there is. I'm going to build a community. And the Rebbe said there's a large majority of the Jews who are not practicing. And it's not because they are in some way against you. It's not out of hostility at all, as it was maybe 100 years before, or even 50 years before. Today, it's people who don't know.
Mm-hmm.
A, and B, they are searching. Everyone was searching. Everyone was searching. And the Rebbe tapped into it and said, don't be afraid. And to me, my perception was, he's the only person that said, we take everything. This is not a watered down, God forbid, a diluted version of Judaism. On the contrary, this is a version which says there is all the intensity and all the sincerity and all the joy and celebration that is part of Judaism. But at the same time, your eyes are open to the fact that, in the 70s, you had the hippies, and somebody told me, someone here I live in a very religious neighborhood, like Williamsburg in London. And somebody said, how could you take someone with long hair into your house? What kind of example is that to your children? And I said, what makes you think that God wants you to have a beautiful Shabbos table and that person should not even know about it?
Right. Wow. How did your parents react to your change? Was there antagonism? Was there what was their feeling?
That's a very, I'll touch upon it. It's very personal. My mother, she joined immediately on the idea. She saw it. She saw the Rebbe's eyes from the distance. She was living in Williamsburg, and many Rabbanim came to our house. My father was a lawyer for all the religious Jews.
Mm-hmm.
She saw Sheshivas and Rebbes and all different types of Jews. She saw the Rebbe from the curb. He came out to see the buses off the Gan Yisrael, the first camp in 1956. And the first postcard she wrote me was, she's considering transferring my youngest brother. He now lives in Lakewood. She was worried. He was 12 years old, and maybe I should transfer him to Lubavitch. She didn't, but just from seeing the Rebbe's eyes. He said, I saw. My father was.
What do you think she saw? Like His Holiness? What did you see? What did she see?
I think that I have not worked it out to this day. Because it wasn't only then. There were a few other times that she saw the Rebbe over the next few years, and every time she got to the essence of it, I don't have
touched her.
I have no rational understanding why she should see the Rebbe from 100 yards or 75 yards and be able to see so much that she's ready to change the school of her youngest child, of eight children.
I guess she was really touched deeply from her soul.
She was, and she always was. Now, my father came from his father, studied in Volozhin and Mir. Those who know about Lithuanian Judaism, Chaim Soloveitchik, Chaim Brisker, and the Natziv, these were famous icons of the Lithuanian world. He was a very orthodox man. My father's a man of principles. He was a lawyer and who had true self-sacrifice for Shabbos. He went to Fordham University Law School. He went there so he should be able to get a job that he could work on Shabbos, that he would be independent of not working for somebody. And he had those are stories in themselves, how he really faced hostility from certain people in that hierarchy. And he respected Lubavitch. And he accepted that I was going to Fabrengens. I was still in yeshiva. But the trajectory that I was supposed to be taking and that I thought I was taking was I'll finish high school. I'll continue studying in what they call the Beis Medrash, in the higher aspect, post-high school in Torah V'das. And at 5 o'clock, you leave and go to evening college. It was like going to a trade school today. And that's what everyone did. And I would be a lawyer, a religious lawyer in Borough Park or wherever. That was the trajectory. And then, after a couple of years, and 2 summers in Gan Yisrael, and Rabbi Gerelik, and Rabbi Lazar, and Rabbi Shem Tov, all these different people, these famous personalities that I had the tremendous privilege to.
Famous Hasidic Lubavitch Hasidim.
Yeah, and the Rebbe told me, Rabbi Gerelik, the second year when I was studying, he said you should try to get a yechidus, a private audience with the Rebbe. He told me this around November, December, about Kislev, let's say. And my birthday is in Adar in February, March. And you had to make an appointment months in advance to see the Rebbe. So he said, how about that? And then I used to come once a week to 770 and learn with somebody a Hasidic discourse. He was visiting Israel, I think, at that time. And in that Yechidus, I asked the Rebbe about, I said that I don't know if I'm ready to come to a Lubavitch Yeshiva. And this is my first direct conversation, as it were, and also about going to university. And the Rebbe said, you're in Torah V'das at least till June anyway. So he didn't talk about that coming to Lubavitch Yeshiva. But he said, as far as college is concerned, it was in Yiddish. He said, if you ask my opinion, I believe that the best thing is to do what you want to do, which is to dedicate all of your energies for 1 year into Torah studies, and maybe more as well. And he said he ended in Yiddish, and maybe more than that as well. So that was already, and then I wrote to the Rebbe at the end of the summer, and I was going back to Torah V'das, and 5 o'clock, I wasn't going to college. everybody was going out. 5 o'clock, 1 or 2 people left, 3 people maybe, from a class of 30 boys. Then I wrote to the Rebbe, and I had a friend, a good friend. I knew him from Torah Vidas, but he became Lubavitch, and he was in Camp Gan Israel, and he told me to come join him in Newark Yeshiva. So when it came up talking about a yeshiva, I mentioned the option of Newark to the Rebbe.
Mm-hmm. That was a Lubavitcher yeshiva.
Today it's Morristown. It was the same yeshiva.
Okay.
But it was in Newark to start with. Rabbinical College of America, it was called, and it still is.
Mm-hmm.
And subsequently, it moved about 5-10 years later to Morristown, because of neighborhood changing. And that got a whole campus. And I wrote that my father would be very upset,
Mm-hmm.
and because he would be concerned if I was studying full time, where would I get a livelihood?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that my father was. If I was going to yeshiva, his experience and his father's experience would have been go to Lakewood or somewhere. But the point is that it was about parnasa. It was about sustenance, about livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote that to the Rebbe. So the Rebbe answered as follows. Newark, I'm going to say the Hebrew words first. Newark o Montreal ka'atzas hararam sheyichye mentlik. That was the first part of the answer. Newark or Montreal,
Mm-hmm.
according to the advice of Rabbi M. Mentlik, who was the Rosh Yeshiva. He was the dean of 770.
Mm-hmm.
Hadibur im ovid sheyichye, the conversation with your father, meyusad al toichin bracha rishona shel birchas hamosin. It should be based on the content, on the meaning of the first blessing of benching, of grace after meals, where and Rabbi Chadakov was asked by the Rebbe to elaborate to me. He gave me the answer, the
Mm-hmm.
Rebbe's personal secretary. And he said that the Rebbe is saying is that God is the one that sustains all the world. And he's going to sustain you too. Don't worry about the livelihood.
Mm-hmm.
That should not be a sense, that should not change it, because you'll get your living.
Mm-hmm.
It's not any one direction. I mean, that's me now paraphrasing.
Right. You don't have to get it from your university. God will provide for you.
That's right.
Right.
Now, then I had to go to Rabbi Mentlik. The Rabbi told me about where to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I started preparing myself mentally. He's going to assess me on the basis of a test, an oral
Mm-hmm.
test in the Talmud that I studied before, and in the Hasidic teachings that I had already assimilated. I was ready for a test.
Mm-hmm.
Come to Rabbi Mentlik. So the Rebbe told me to ask you. He said, "What did he tell you?" He said, Rebbe wrote Newark. I showed him the answer, the words, Newark or Montreal. He said, "What did you write to the Rebbe?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, "I wrote about the idea of going to Newark." He said, "Did you mention Montreal in your letter?" I said, "No, I didn't know it exists."
Mm-hmm.
He says, "Montreal."
Mm-hmm.
The whole discussion was 30 seconds.
Wow. And that was
He said
decided.
one word. He said, "I think the Rebbe sent me to him to learn what it means to be a chassid."
Mm-hmm.
If the Rebbe says a word to appreciate, don't waste your time trying to analyze if it's right or not.
Mm-hmm.
Use those same energies to implement it.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I went to Montreal after Simchas Torah. And that Simchas Torah, there was a Farbrengen of the Rebbe every year before the Hakafis, before the dancing. Everyone would go to shuls up to 4 or 5 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And as they were coming back, the Rebbe was leading a Farbrengen to prepare for the dancing in 770. This Farbrengen started about 9:30 at night, And it went until about 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning even. Then the Rebbe went out for a half hour, an hour, and 770 was changed from Farbrengen mode physically. Took out all the tables, benches, to Hakafa, to dancing mode. And at that Farbrengen, I walked up to the Rebbe. It was my first Yom Tiv. I knew now I'm in. I must say it still took me 2 years until it dawned on me, you're not in Lubavitch. Lubavitch is in you. That took me another 2 years beyond, till 1960. This was the end of 57. This was October 57, Simchas Torah. And I walked up to the Rebbe. He was at the front, giving the Farbrengen, in between talks, between sichos. And I said to the Rebbe in Yiddish, I had a l'chaim, Ich will beten a brache, ich soll haben atzlache in Tamchet Mimim. I'd like to ask you for a blessing that I should succeed in Tamchet Mimim, in Lubavitch Yeshiva. And the Rebbe said, Amen v'Amen. Double Amen. Only time I ever heard that from the Rebbe, ever. And then I walked away from the Rebbe. It was customary to withdraw. You don't turn your back on the Rebbe. You walk the first 10 steps, you walk backwards. So as I'm walking backwards, the Rebbe called after me and said, that's episode 102. You also have to do something. In other words, don't just rely on my blessings and my spiritual powers. It's a partnership. Getting a bracha from a Rebbe is something which empowers and entrusts you, but it really depends on you. Doesn't remove our. Rebbe told me years later in something when he told me off about not using my capabilities as much. He said, "I can only promise, but you have to deliver." Basically.
Right. Wow. And where does that leave us nowadays? Like, I mean, these are, I'm sure people are listening thinking, wow, these are such beautiful stories and such, incredible inspiration that we got from the Rebbe. But what about nowadays? What about today?
I want you to know that the Rebbe today is very, very accessible. Much, much more than he was all the years that I was in Lubavitch, even after I was married with children and grandchildren, everything. The Rebbe was, there was the personal thing. The Rebbe said, here's $1, that type of thing. But knowing about that, I used to stay in 770, a night when the Rebbe had yechidus, personal audiences, 3 nights a week until late 64, and then 2 nights a week, very often through the night. But an early yechidus, or early audiences, would end at about 1 o'clock in the morning. And I would try to stay in 770 just in case somebody comes out and will come into the zal, into the study hall, and share a little snippet. And I would get 3-4 such snippets a year. And today, you have Gem, you have podcasts, you have, despite apart from all of the works of the Rebbe, the tapes, it's incredible what's available today about the Rebbe. The thing is, you want a personal connection to the Rebbe. I asked the Rebbe about a personal connection in 1961, when I was just before my 21st birthday. How can I be connected to you? It was in an audience as a bacher in Montreal, my 4th year in Montreal. And the Rebbe said, you will be connected with me through Torah if you study what I study and what I want you to study. And most important, if you respect and keep to the Seder, the times, the schedule of the yeshiva, being punctual in the times of the yeshiva, the whole Rosh, he said, that's first and foremost. And I at the end, when the Rebbe finished the whole audience, the Rebbe would talk and he would say a bracha at a certain tone the Abius will help for this and that and the other. Then he finished, and the Rebbe would look up. He had eye contact, and you knew that was the cue to withdraw.
Mm-hmm.
But when he finished the bracha, I couldn't say, Rebbe, what did you learn? The Rebbe said, learn what I learned. I said, we spoke about the Rebbe in third person. I said, the Rebbe, this tone, I said it in Yiddish. The Rebbe said I should learn what the Rebbe learns. That's all I said in Yiddish. And the end of the sentence was, I don't know what you learned.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rebbe, here I got eye contact, and the Rebbe said, I learned Nigla and Chassidus, the revealed part of Torah and the inner part. And Torah is different from mitzvahs. Mitzvahs, it's explained in Likutei Torah Bamidbar. He told me the reference where I can find it. He said it's in Likutei Torah Bamidbar. It's about Daf Yud Gimmel for those who want to look it up. But the Rebbe said it contrasts. Every mitzvah is compared to and relates to a different part of the body. So that's only 613 mitzvahs. The Torah is compared to the blood circulation. And the same blood circulates throughout the body. And therefore, any part of Torah. So the question is, how does that connect? I worked it out. I'm not going to bore everybody with this, but I believe it's if you're studying Torah, and part of it is because you want to be able to connect to the Rebbe as the leader of the generation and as the guide and the head of the generation, you'll get it with any part of Torah you do with that in mind, especially if you're studying the Rebbe's teachings themselves, which he put his life and soul into. And the Rambam, obviously, the Rebbe mentioned Chitas, studying Chumash and Tanya as the study schedule of Lubavitch followers, and Rambam, studying a daily section of Rambam didn't exist in those days, but today that's a very central part of the study schedule of any Chabad person. You asked about my father. I want to go back.
Right.
So he was really not happy.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rebbe told me when I was in Yechidus, it was 4 a.m. in Shvat, 1958, Sofshin Yud Ches. When we came in for Yud Shvat, the Rebbe told me that, and I told the Rebbe that things were a bit strained. And the Rebbe said, you being successful in your studies in Montreal will change him.
Mm.
And I said, I told the Rebbe, I thought maybe I should get him to come meet the Rebbe. And the Rebbe said, you cannot tell a person to go and meet an individual person, just, out of the blue.
Mm.
He said, you could invite him to a Farbrengen, but you're not here. There'll be a Farbrengen Purim, which is 5 weeks later. The Rebbe asked me who was I close to in Camp Gan Yisrael. I said, Rabbi Avraham Shem Tov.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, get him to invite him to the Farbrengen Purim.
Mm.
And he said, there he'll see that there are people with beards and without beards, Hasidim and non-Hasidim, and all different types. He'll hear a little bit about what's spoken, and he'll change his attitude to Hasidim. And the main thing is your success in your studies in Montreal will be reflected. And my father did go. Rabbi Shem Tov took him in. The Rebbe said you can get him a lift in a car. I don't know how the Rebbe knew. My father never drove. But the Rebbe said get him a lift. And when Rabbi Shem Tov said, would you come to the Farbrengen? He said, he used to speak to him in Russian. He said, will you send me a kareta, a coach? The first thing he said. But he went. He was there it was a very historic Farbrengen as well. It was extremely, extremely intense. And Achron Shel Pesach, so 2 months later, after my audience with the Rebbe, I was a kid, 18 years old. I went to Kosher Bracha. After the Farbrengen, the Rebbe would give from his own cup that he said Havdalah and benched. He would give everyone present, and I waited till the end always. And so it's about 2:00 in the morning, and I'm coming by, and the Rebbe said, "Did your father tell you anything over from Purim?" So he recognized me. He remembered the whole conversation, and that my father had been there, and he said it'll get even better. Now, fast forward 5 years later, 1963, plus coming up now, our anniversary, 61 years of our wedding.
Wow.
And we had the tremendous zuchus that the Rebbe was the Masada Kedushin. He officiated. That's a whole story in itself. But since the Rebbe is going to be there, my parents wanted to meet the Rebbe before the wedding. So 10 days before, with the night that I went in with my fiancée at the time for the bracha before the wedding. We'd been before as an engaged couple twice, but this was a long engagement. But anyway, my parents went in, and I did something which I never did before or since. I opened the door and I said to the Rebbe, "These are my parents." And the Rebbe stood up and walked around his desk, which was very special covenant, stretched out his hand to my father, and I discreetly closed the door. But my father told me, my father was a man of like ironclad principles, and he felt he didn't deserve. So he told the Rebbe in Yiddish, he said to the Rebbe, "I don't deserve this kind of a special honor." When he said, when my son went to your yeshiva, it took me 3 years to come to terms with it. So the Rebbe said to him, this is in Yiddish. So the Rebbe said, "Was sagt ihr heint? What do you say today?" So my father said, "Heint bin ich zufrieden. Today I'm happy." So the Rebbe said, "Let's talk about today." That's a lesson in life. It was a lesson in life. The Rebbe was saying, look for the good and build on it.
Right. And don't harp on the negative, and don't harp on the past. Wow.
100%.
Wow. There's so many stories that you have. I want to ask you a little about you were working for so many years in education. How do you feel, or what is necessary for an educator to give to raise students that are successful? And how do you feel the Rebbe impacted your role as an educator?
Anything that I have, to the extent that I have, and to the extent I have had successes, I've had many, like everybody, disappointments. The point is, you have to be able to see the student quite apart from their behavior and quite apart from your expectation. They're on a journey. The same thing applies as a parent and a grandparent, except even where you don't approve. Accept the person, don't dilute your message, but adjust the manner of communicating it according to the needs of the person, of the generation. To different, students today are different. I'm teaching now for 60 years. I took a class today of 14-year-old girls in school, in my high school, and they're different than they were 10 years ago, and certainly different than they were in the 60s, 60 years ago. It's different, but they are tremendous. There's a potential in the students today, both as students, as Orthodox Jews, as connected Jews, inspired, and Hasidim, connected to the Rebbe. They know about the Rebbe. I have a grandson. He was studying 2 years ago. He was studying in Manchester. It's a couple 100 miles from here, but they had an off week once a month. So he came here for Shabbos. And Friday night, before I made Kiddush, I took the becha, I took the cup of wine, and with a tissue, with a napkin, I wiped it out as I saw the Rebbe doing it. So my grandson mumbles to me, the Rebbe did it with 3 fingers. I saw the Rebbe doing it hundreds of times. I never counted the fingers he did it with.
Right.
So
Right.
there's a certain type today. Type means hundreds and hundreds of such kids in their 20s today that are into that. And then there are more hundreds that are not into that, but they're into studying, and they can tell you things, the early years after Gimmel Tammuz, after the Rebbe passed away in the physical sense. And I spoke to many people in day camps, to the counselors, to the teenagers, to the young adults, and they said, you saw. Today I feel the kids are telling me you didn't see.
Mm-hmm.
You looked, but you didn't really.
Mm-hmm.
The one that wants, they're as accessible. So what's the rule? The rule is to know what your message is. And I got this from the Rebbe, from studying the Rebbe's teachings, especially the letters of the Rebbe, in how to look at people. Uncompromising in the light, in the message, in the idea, in the emotion that you want to communicate. But at the same time, put tremendous effort into, I guess, assessing, calculating, working out, how can I get that message through to this particular person in these circumstances? There's a work by the previous Rebbe called The Principles of Education and Guidance. There are 17 chapters. I learned it with one of the top classes, kids of 16, 17. And I think that the majority, I never did the arithmetic, but I think that the vast majority of chapters, of those 17 chapters, are teaching you how to assess who you're talking to. It also says the message, Torah doesn't change.
Mm-hmm.
No matter what the age, no matter where the domicile, no matter what the habits of the person is, what their economic position is, what the occupation is, the Torah doesn't change. But how you do it, well, what do you do when somebody has two very serious defects in their character? Chinuch, education, is not knowledge. It's character.
Mm-hmm.
It's attitude. And what do you do with all these things? We study that. So I pick up from there, and I pick up just from life experience, working with university students for 10 years. I was teaching. The Rebbe told me to teach when I came to England, and always, even when I was coming back from Oxford University, 3 a.m, I had classes for years in Jonathan Sachs's room when he was a student in Cambridge. After he came to Lubavitch, and he went back to the university, and that continued with other students. I used to get home sometimes 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I had to be 9 o'clock teaching. Eventually, the Rebbe told me to become principal of the girls' high school. So after then, dealing with students is merely an avocation. It's not my main job description.
With students in university, you're saying?
I had classes, there was no Zoom and all this type of thing.
Right.
But I had the following things. I had regular classes
Mm-hmm.
in London itself,
Mm-hmm.
King's College, LSE, London School of Economics, at University College within the Hillel House, which is right nearby, once a week, Queen Mary College in the East End. Then I had in Oxford and Cambridge, every 2 weeks. 1 week I went to Oxford, 1 week to Cambridge, every 2 weeks during term time. Their terms are only 8 weeks at a time, 3 terms a year. And I used to go there. That's where I met Jonathan Sachs, in Cambridge at the university the first time. And then I would generate visits. I had a mailing list of hundreds, about 800, 900 people. And I would generate visits to other campuses all over the country.
Wow.
And then I made a pkisha, an encounter. It was not together. We had a team. We'd go with a group of people, but I was the organizer. And I would try, and many of those students are today themselves the parents and grandparents of shluchim. Those students I tried where I could until 1970. I was able to get them. I raised money from friends, people, cajoled to give them free tickets to New York and send them to Hadar Torah, to Morristown for a few weeks, and to get a yechidus, a private audience with the Rebbe. And that was beautiful at that time. When you look back, when you're a bit more mature, approaching middle age, and you look back, you think of how I could have done it much better. But that's you do what you can. So going back to education and parenting, there are two rules. Number one is communicate. The biggest challenge of the generation of both teachers and even parents. And it's because there's so many means of communication today that people rely on devices. I'm talking about the parents now, not just the children. And I don't just mean that they're on their device. They let the child become entertained by watching a positive, a good videotape, kosher, civic. But don't forget, you have to talk to your child every day.
Right.
Every single day. It's communicating with our children. It's talking to them, and most important, listening. I tell parents, listen to them when they're 5 years old, and they'll want to tell you something when they're 15. Then you're going to want them to talk to you, and they're going to talk to someone else.
Right.
I promise you, they're going to talk to someone.
Right.
So you're at least in the running.
Right.
And the second thing is, even just as important, is to be a role model. The Rebbe says in a famous sikh, but he said it many times, children look up to their parents as their heroes. And they envisage a successful life as being half of what their parents are. Halavai, if only I could be half of what my parent is. So Rebbe said, whatever you decide you'd like your child to be double that.
Wow.
So and they'll be half of it. So those two things together, all other, you can give a lecture for an hour on education. It's going to, at the end of the day, it's going to be extensions of those two ideas.
Right.
And the young people of today, they have tremendous, they're exposed to a tremendous amount of knowledge. But wisdom and discernment, which comes with age. A kid tells me, why can you not trust me with a smartphone? I'm 12, I'm already a bas mitzvah. And my parents have a smartphone. And I say, why can you not have a driving license, even if you know all the rules, the highway code? I said, there's certain things you have to, it's not because it's bad or good. It's learning how to handle. It's being able to respect where our children, where this generation is. And you have to take into consideration they are knowledgeable. They know everything. And they do. And they know a lot more than their parents and grandparents in certain areas. But they need, and they know that they need it. They're crying out for guidance, for connection. The connections that we make today, it's good. Everything's a blessing if you use it for good. Everything's, but it doesn't mean that now we can fall back. Okay, I don't have to talk to my kids anymore because I have everything's all there on tape. Everything's there. It's so easily presentable.
Right. Sure. For sure. Rabbi Lew, you shared so many stories and so many memories and so much that we can learn from. if you had to look back at the many, many encounters that you had with the Rebbe over the many, many years, what would you say was the one that had the biggest impression or impact on you for your life, and that you really have to take and live with?
I'll tell you two.
Okay.
One is an observation of the Rebbe. I was on the radio here was after Gimmel Tammuz, so I went straight, obviously, but I came back a day. I couldn't cry, I couldn't mourn because I had to come back to the school. I just remember that was. I figured I can't leave the kids alone, and I came back the Monday. Gimmel Cham was Sunday, and Tuesday morning I arrived with jet lag with everything. I said I want an assembly of the whole school, and everybody should write in advance questions anonymously.
This was for those that don't know, Gimmel Tammuz is the day of the passing of the Rebbe.
The passing of the Rebbe, and I got about 50 little notes, and there was confusion, there was anger, there was shock, there were doubts. What about Mashiach? What about this? What about all the other people making fun of us? Whatever it was, there were all these types of questions. I read the questions. I read them in the office. I cried from the questions, more than from Gimmel Tammuz.
Right. Wow.
And then I took an assembly with the school. I divided them into 3 general categories. And we had a 45-minute assembly. And I said, that's how we move forward. We had other sessions. We had Rabbi Tali Lowenthal here, like a gem, like a treasure in Chabad, and he took classes. They made a little booklet of the conversations of that week. All the Kodesh, all of the Hebrew lessons were dedicated to understanding what happened and what's next, etc., etc. And anyway, so the radio, they asked me, what's a moment, a snapshot of the Rebbe after a whole interview? And that's what I want to share as one of the things, even though it wasn't to me direct. At the end of a Yom Tiv, and let's take Simchas Torah, 1991, the last time we had this. There's been 8 days of the Rebbe saying a talk every evening for about an hour, standing on his feet. The man is 89 years old. Then there's 2 days, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah, with his dancing, there's Hakafis, there are Fabrengins, and climaxed with a 6-hour talk from about 6:30 till about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning at the end of Simchas Torah. And then we bench, we say the grace after meals, and we daven, Ma'ariv, the evening prayer, and the Rebbe makes Havdalah, the ceremony at the end of a festival. It's now about 1:30 in the morning. The Rebbe spent the next 2 or 3 hours personally giving from his cup of wine. There's a chassid who keeps replenishing into the cup, and the Rebbe is pouring. Thousands, no exaggeration, thousands of people coming, walking by, a man standing on his feet after all of that, and it's 4 o'clock in the morning. The time is moving on, and people are coming in from Borough Park, from Williamsburg, other not Chabad, people with shtreimels, with all different types of headgear, not religious people, driving in from New Jersey and Pennsylvania, flying in from Miami even. Thousands of people. The Rebbe is just standing giving wine the whole time. And the way it worked was that there were 4 queues, 4 lines, and they converged into 2 lines on either side of the table, and they walked past the Rebbe, and then there was a whole team of people to help the line move as quickly as possible, giving you the cup so that everything that happened, instead of taking 7 hours, it would take only 3.5 hours. And you see all the young people. I watched all the Bukhrim. This is me, 50-year-old. I'm looking at the 20-year-olds and 21, and they're looking back at the feeder lines. Like, how much more is this going to be? They're exhausted. Just watching. They'll be watching the Rebbe singing songs. And then eventually the 4 lines became 3, and the 3 became 2. And then you just had the 2, and then it was just 1 line. And all this time, there was for 3 or 4 hours pouring wine. Not once did they ever look to the door, see how much more to go. At the end, when the last person got the wine, the Rebbe's eyes are sparkling, as if he just had a good breakfast, about to start a day's work, as a 35-year-old person, and says, I remember they were holding the becher and saying, is there anybody else who needs? A person like that is there and available and accessible today. If you want. The Rebbe said, I'm giving. Now you want, study my teachings, appoint yourself a mentor, take yourself seriously. Having a Rebbe is not being able to hero worship someone, a very great person. Of course it's that. That's a mitzvah in the Torah, to recognize a gadol, the great person. It's accessing the deepest and most powerful part of yourself, of your ownership. That's what it's about. Anyway, on a yechidus, on a personal audience, I was in a personal audience at least 29 times.
Wow.
I tried different. Some was just for a couple of minutes, but each one was a whole experience. I was able to go, for my birthday when I was a bacha, and then when our oldest son was born, my wife was in alone in her 9th month. One was able to come get a bracha from the Rebbe before the woman had a child, and then during the week before the bris, I had a private audience the night before the bris. Actually, that was one type. There was times we visited, and then there was the type the day before we left, the day before we flew to England. So this is a lifetime shlichus. And each of them, there was interesting things, enough for a whole program, for a whole podcast. But I'm going to say one aspect of one of those. It was in 1974, the day after Simchas Torah, Tovshin Lamed Hey. Yes. It was 1974, a Thursday night, the night after Simchas Torah. The Rebbe was going to see thousands, well, certainly hundreds of people that night. He was in for an all-night. And anyone will tell you, whoever went into Yechidus, who read the accounts, that when they went in, whether it was 11 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the morning, the Rebbe was fresh, alert. Not just like all there, 1,000%. And I went in with a 5-year-old son who I had taken for Simchas Torah to Sukkot to the Rebbe. And we were going in that night, and I was about to leave for England after Shabbos. This was Thursday night. So I just wrote, the custom was not to start a conversation. You would write your request for a blessing. I wrote 2 lines, please give a blessing to me and our whole family and extended family, something to that effect. And I expected this to be one of the 2-minute Yechidusim, which is also a lifetime. The Rebbe could do in 2 minutes what a normal person would need a year to do, or more. And it turned out to be one of the longest audiences I ever had. In fact, the Rebbe's secretary, the next night, Friday night in Shul, before the Rebbe came down, he said to me, why did you do it? He was like a friend also. He subsequently, I'm a chutin. He says, I said, when I go into the Rebbe, my principle was I don't say, even by dollars, people beg me to give a message. I say one word, and that's Amen at the end. I've had many other things I said, but it was only because the Rebbe initiated the question. So the Rebbe asked me about, it was just after he made the campaign for all girls to light candles. I was at that time dealing mainly with university students. The Rebbe told me about, if you meet female Jewish students who do not keep a single thing of Yiddishkeit, how to get them to light a candle. Not because of Frumkeit, but because of Ehrlichkeit. He used a Yiddish word, because of honesty, to make sure they do it before Shabbos. Anyway, then the Rebbe threw me like a curveball. He asked me something which it just didn't fit in to my. I told this to Rabbi Gonda the next day. I said, the Rebbe asked me, he said, I didn't realize that I was 34 and a half years old then. I didn't deal with the community as such, the machers, the big dealers in the Anglo-Jewish community, a very organized community. I dealt with students. I dealt with their children, many of them. But not that generation. I was dealing with young people. They ever asked me, have you heard from, was called him Mr. X, a certain communal figure, well known, and I had no real contact with this person. But it just happened that a few weeks before, I had been on the airport, Heathrow Airport, and I met a rabbi who I knew from South Africa, Rabbi Bernhard, Olav Shalom. At that time, he was a very, very big respecter and follower of the Rebbe as the leader of world Jewry. But subsequently, he became a total follower. Halavai, I should have the sincerity that he had in his following of the Rebbe. So I met him at the airport. Just a chance. And he told me that he had had breakfast that day with Mr. X. He was here visiting the English community. He was here for a day, I think. Stopover. And that man severely criticized the Rebbe. That's what he told me. For the Rebbe's stance on the who is a Jew question, Mihu Yehudi, it's called, who is a Jew? And it had to do with the law of return in Israel and whom do you recognize as a Jew? And the Rebbe said that is really the most serious thing in the agenda because it has to do with the whole Jewish identity. We should all be one. So he said he severely criticized. So, and the Rebbe told me in this audience, wasn't that late? It was maybe 11 o'clock an hour. It's with a 5-year-old kid. The Rebbe said, have you heard anything from this man lately? And I felt obviously obligated to answer the Rebbe's question. And I said, I met Rabbi Bernhard a few weeks ago on the airport, and he told me that he met him and that Mr. X had stark kritikiyat. I said he strongly criticized the Rebbe to the extent that Rabbi Bernhard said that he saw that there's no point in arguing with him. On the other hand, he did not want him to, so he said, Rabbi, I told this all to the Rebbe. He told this man, I totally disagree with you, but let's change the subject. He made it clear that he didn't agree, but he changed the subject. And so when I said this, the Rebbe said to me something which I'd never experienced before. The Rebbe explained to me why that man said it. Anyone else of the 7 billion people in the world would say it was defensive almost. Well, the Rebbe was there teaching me a lesson for life, which I'm going to share with everyone. The Rebbe said the reason that this man said it is because somebody told him a lashon hara or God Amotzi Shemra. A lashon hara means a negative speech, speaking negatively against a fellow who, even if it's true. Amotzi Shemra is slander. It's not even true.
Mm-hmm.
So the Rebbe says someone told him a lashon hara, and maybe even a motzi shemra, a true negative, or maybe namely that I attacked him in my public address when I spoke about who is a Jew, because that man had a different approach, a different view. So the Rebbe said, when I speak publicly, because the Rebbe explaining to me what he does. He said, when I speak publicly, ich red nicht wegen Menschen, ich red wegen Shittus. I don't speak about personalities. I speak about ideas. In other words, even if I disagreed with him, it was never personal.
Mm-hmm.
I said what I believe. And it was never had that. As the Rebbe is saying this, I'm standing like a soldier in front of the Rebbe, and I'm taking this all in. This Yechidus, I thought it's going to be 2 minutes, and it's already about 5-10 minutes into the Yechidus. And I said to myself, it's all in a half a second. Went through my mind, this man is the greatest leader, the greatest activist, the greatest builder, the greatest publisher, the greatest scholar, the greatest mystic, the greatest educator of the generation. And at the same time, he's your best friend as well. And if your best friend had somebody who had a gripe against them, you do something about it. This will half a second, by the way. Go to my mind in half of a second that when I get back to England, by hook or by crook, I'm going to meet Mr. X and set him straight. As I'm thinking this, the Rebbe says, not a good idea, you should go to him. So I was only thinking, the next second, I was a little bit of a wise guy. In my own mind, I said to myself, I'll get Rabbi Vogel. Vogel Flita is a senior colleague, and he did have contact with these kind of people. I'll get him to meet him. I would just say to myself, you must do something about this. That's what I just said to myself. That's a long-term goal when I get back to England. So 1 second, I'm thinking, the Rebbe answers it. Then I saw Rabbi Vogel, the Rebbe then says, not a good idea, you should ask somebody else of Anash to go. And to him, the Rebbe said, if that man came to me, I could set him straight. I could do it. But I saw here, so the Rebbe said, in 1 second, I saw like holiness, Ruach HaKodesh, Holy Spirit, something, a miracle. One after the other answered my thoughts. Then the Rebbe said, the thing to know, this is the way forward, and this is the significant message in life, in chinuch, in parenting, in relationships, in marriages, in anything you want. The Rebbe said to me, there are 613 commandments in the Torah. Who is a Jew is one of them. If he does not want to cooperate with us on who is a Jew, let's work together with him on the other 612. And to me, that's my life. It means you're always going to find somehow or another, we're not clones, we're not identical twins even, and even identical twins are not identical. So they're always, in any relationship, whether it's in marriage, and whether it's in parenting, whether it's in educating, whether it's in communal work, whether it's in your shul, whether it's your business, wherever you are, social life, you're going to find things that you don't agree on. Don't chas v'shalom. There isn't say we're going to compromise. So what do we have in common? We work on. There are many talks today about Aleph and Beis, teaching the Aleph. But that, to me, that was the direction in life. Look for that which unites you, and build on that. That's life.
That's a beautiful message. That's really beautiful. Rabbi Lew, thank you so much for spending the time with us and for giving us your memories, your teachings, your inspiration, and a path forward of what we should be, our direction forward of what we should be doing.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. That was indeed an extraordinary interview with Rabbi Lew. I felt that there was just so much wisdom, so much knowledge, so many personal experiences that he shared with us today that I could have gone on for hours and it would have really not been even enough time. What hit me in particular was I was intrigued with his background, how his parents took to his coming to Chabad, and how each of them in their own way, how his mother just looked at the Rebbe and intrinsically felt this connection, which is a connection that so many people find when they looked at the Rebbe. There was just this soul meeting soul, this kind of connection that they just knew. And his father's coming around to his actually coming. I was intrigued with how the Rebbe advised Rabbi Lew to send a car, to get someone to pick up his father up by car, how even these little details was something that the Rebbe was so in tune with and realized was so important in order to get somebody to come. And I was also intrigued with when his father said that I've spent so many years going against his decision to come. I don't feel like I deserve this honor. How the Rebbe said, now we have to focus on moving forward. And what a lesson that is for life, moving forward. And that was echoed as well in the last story that Rabbi Lew told about this person who was against the Rebbe and how the Rebbe said there's 612 other mitzvos in the Torah that we can focus on. We need to focus on our commonality. We need to focus on what we share rather than what divides us. And that really is such a message that we need for today's times, to focus on the commonality, to focus on what connects us rather than what divides us. What hit me the most, though, I have to say, is Rabbi Lew's, when he told the story of the Rebbe and he actually emotionally broke down, talking about the Rebbe standing there watching the lines, giving out his koshel bracha, his cup of wine, for lines and lines that were for hours and hours on end, and how finally, when the last person actually passed, the Rebbe was still looking, is there anybody else to whom I can give? Wow. Is there anybody else to whom I can give? Imagine if we just had one little tiny bit of that feeling of what else can I do? To whom else can I give? To whom else can I share with what I have and the wisdom that I have or the resources that I have? How can I give to others? If you enjoy watching these podcasts, please make sure that you are subscribed, Chabad.org/extraordinary. We love to hear from you. Share your feedback and make sure as well that you are watching us on all podcast platforms, whether you're exercising, cooking, or doing your work. You can have this playing in the background and you could actually enjoy listening while you are doing your other things that you need to take care of. Thank you so much for being part of the Chabad.org extraordinary community. Thank you for watching. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being a part of it. And please share with your friends and let them know about it as well. Have a wonderful day.